welcome to a reading vlog. This was not supposed to be a reading vlog. I've decided to reschedule things. I had a different video that I was going to do where I did a try the chapter tag. And then after the try the chapter tag, I was going to reorganize my bookshelves. After reorganizing my bookshelves, I was going to do a bookshelf tour. And then I was possibly going to do a reading vlog. Everything just went out the window. Everything changed. I'm going to figure out my schedule later after I'm done with my morning relaxing reading that I decided to do for myself. So this is going to be a reading vlog, and a couple different things happened to make this a more themed reading vlog. I read the first chapter of A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher, and then I read the next chapter because it was only 8 pages. And I'm on page 48 now. The day has started to escape. I no longer have the day. My vlog no longer makes sense because it's try a chapter tag and I'm on chapter 4. I'm just gonna read this. The other reason that really solidified this in my body, mind, and soul is the fact that Libby just dropped 2 books into my possession. The first book that Libby gave to me was A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. The next book that Libby gave me was The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. So that's 3 T. Kingfisher books all plopping into my lap in one morning. I'm gonna make this a T. Kingfisher vlog. I've actually read a lot of T. Kingfisher. I can grab the books now. Hold on. I own A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. I've read this. What Moves the Dead? I've read this. And I also just finished the sequel. And then I've also read Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. This was the first T. Kingfisher I read, and it was a great starting point. Along with Swordheart, Paladin's something, I think it's Grace. I've read a lot of T. Kingfisher's backlist, and I can make this a little bit more of a comprehensive review or possible recommendation video for where to start with T. Kingfisher. That's now my vlog. I've now completely destroyed all of my filming plans. I will have to reorganize my filming situation. But we are now starting a T. Kingfisher vlog. I'm very excited. A Sorceress Comes to Call has been on my mind, and now that I've started it, this has 5-star potential, and I'm here for it. I don't know what I'm getting into with the other ones, but we're gonna get started. I guess I could go ahead and tell you first about A Sorceress Comes to Call, since I just read the first few chapters. This follows a girl named Cordelia, who is incredibly isolated and lives alone with her mother. Her mother is a sorceress. Cordelia starts to slowly realize that and comes to terms with the fact that her life and how she's being raised is not incredibly normal, nor is it incredibly safe or healthy. Her mother is incredibly manipulative and very controlling, and Cordelia has a hard time making friends. As Cordelia's mother's motivations and plot really comes to fruition, another character enters the scene, also believes that Cordelia is in a bad situation. T. Kingfisher normally does older voices, and there is an older voice in this, but the way that she's writing Cordelia as a child is also just incredibly on point. I'm gonna read a few more chapters, and then I'm going to try a chapter of Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking and The Hollow Places, and see which one I want to kind of like dual read, since I'm reading this one physically and the other 2 are audibly. Welcome to this vlog, the T. Kingfisher vlog. At the end, I'll give a comprehensive list of all the books I've read, which ones I recommend, and possibly kind of rank them as far as my enjoyability and overall how I think of T. Kingfisher as an author. I always say she kind of like stole my heart as a favorite. I really want to put that up against her other books and think of her more as a comprehensive list of stories. I'm still going to put up a bookshelf tour, but I think I'm not going to wait to read all the first chapters, and then I'll just put up a try your chapter thing after I'm done with this. You will still get that video, possibly before this one. Everything is wrecked. Schedule destroyed. But videos will come. Things will happen. I believe in my ability to pre-film before February, so it's gonna be fine. Okay, so I just finished the first chapter of The Hollow Places, and I really liked it. Voice, always on point with T. Kingfisher. This character is Kara. She just got out of a bad relationship, and she's gonna go stay with her uncle who owns like a collect-all shop. One of those, you know, side of the road, giant yarn ball emporiums. She's gonna go stay with him, and so far we've gotten to kind of like know her uncle, her situation. I don't know what the actual plot is. I just have all of T. Kingfisher's backlist like, saved on my Libby app, so this one came in and I don't actually know what it's about, and I'm gonna go ahead and not know what it's about. I know that it is within the horror genre. There's always a bit of horror in T. Kingfisher. I don't know how this one is really gonna creep up. Right now it seems fairly like contemporary and benign, not fantastical, so I don't know, but it was nice and it was fun and it was funny. And I think Earl, which is the uncle's name, I think that he's a really interesting character that a lot of people have in their lives. It's essentially like that family member who means so well, and sometimes they say things that are not okay, but you know that their heart is in the right place, and it's just this odd frustration that you have with this person where you love them so deeply, but they say such frustrating things. The critical thought is not always there, or the difference of opinion is so strong that it makes it hard to communicate, but you know you love each other. And I feel like a lot of people have been put into that situation situation. It's interesting to watch it unfold in this way. So yeah, that's the beginning of that book. I'm gonna go ahead and listen to the first chapter of A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking and see which one that I listen to next. I have been folding laundry. I've actually gotten quite a bit of it done. I just didn't do B-roll for it. It didn't feel interesting to me, but I listened to the first chapter of A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, and it was absurd and felt way younger than what I was expecting. It felt like middle grade, but also with these pops of horror that were happening. I don't know. I was expecting it to be a little cozier from the get-go, but like the first thing that happens is a corpse. So there's a corpse in the bakery is how this story opens up, and our main character, I can't remember her name, but she is a baker that does like little bakery magic. She has a sourdough starter named Bob. She can do magic, but it's just not big magic. She works at her family bakery and she finds a body. So it's mostly just her reacting to that, the fact that that's very much so out of the norm for her. It felt fairly realistic to how you would react. The inner monologue is very stream of consciousness, but in a way where you can follow it and you're also like, yeah, I'd maybe have that thought too. So you are getting a lot of her thoughts and reactions. And then obviously there's a bit of a mystery that opens up because the body wasn't supposed to be on the floor of the bakery. I think hollow places actually drew me in a little bit more though. I am really interested in the character dynamic that was happening with the main character, Kara and Earl. I don't know, they had very strong character. For now, I'm gonna switch over to the hollow places for listening during like a commute, sleeping, relaxing, and then when I have downtime to actually have a book in my hands, I'll switch over to A Sorceress Comes to Call. So we got a game plan. I'll do an update later when something interesting happens, which is definitely not laundry. Okay, I am in love with this book. This might be the best book of hers I have read. I haven't finished it yet though, so I feel like I'm just so excited. I'm gonna talk about it a little bit more because I feel like I have a bigger grasp on what's going on now. There was a scene that happened that made me read the next chapter that got me through the fourth chapter, and it was such a betrayal. It bugged me so much that I was like, I need to read more. I need to see this turn out differently because I'm still thinking about the fourth chapter betrayal. I can't stop thinking about it. The main character also is thinking about it. She'll just randomly have the thought and it'll just hurt her heart and it'll hurt my heart at the same time because it was just so mean. It was just so bad. Oh man. Did I say I was going to talk more about this book? Because I'm sorry. Okay, let's try again. I can talk about this more now and I will try and make it cohesive. Cordelia is so sweet and she is in a isolated and abusive relationship with her mother. Her mother is incredibly manipulative but also is a sorceress, and so this is a literal manipulation. She can take over and control Cordelia's body and make Cordelia do things that she doesn't want to do. Cordelia is 14, but her mother is saying she's 17 in order to marry her off. Her name is Evangeline, but Hester, who is another character, calls her Doom. That is so accurate because there is such a sense of looming dread while this woman is on page. She seeps off the page in the most irritating way. Oh god. If you've read my book, she makes Elise look like a sweetheart, okay? Oh, this woman. So, Evangeline is trying to marry this guy called the Squire, and he's a well-to-do nobleman. Evangeline and Cordelia are self-made nobility or of lower status. Definitely, they don't have as much money, but they are playing the part in order to get into the Squire's pants and get Evangeline married to the Squire so that she can then marry off Cordelia. Hester is the Squire's sister and the other POV in this book. She's in her 50s. She immediately sees Evangeline and thinks that she's no good, and she doesn't want her anywhere near her brother. However, her brother is absolutely smitten, so Cordelia and Evangeline go to live with Hester and the Squire in their house, and some sort of dinner party is happening. There's so much tension in this book. There's these sweet moments. It's a charming book. Is charming the right word? I could possibly put this in horror. Charming horror fantasy, and it's just so good. There's some other characters being introduced, and I'm getting to know them. So far, I literally just like everyone, apart from Evangeline. I think Hester is my favorite character, but I love Cordelia so much. I really do love her. Now that I'm in my 30s, I'm like, Hester, I see you too. I see your bad back. I see your hurt leg. She is where a lot of T. Kingfisher's humor is coming in because Cordelia, literally, she cracks jokes in her head and then will not say them out loud. And sometimes, like, she accidentally says a joke and it'll be funny, but she's mortified because she's like, oh my god, did people think that's funny? Or is that real? Or are people lying? Because she watches her mother lie all the time. There's been so many just heart-wrenching moments. I need to hurry up and finish this book. And at the beginning of the year, like, that's what you want. You want to find that book high so you don't lose momentum immediately. Nothing is worse than having a book slump at the beginning of the year. At the end, I'm like, whatever, I've done it. I've read all year. But to start off with a banger, good feeling. I'm gonna get back to reading this, and then I'm going to fall asleep to the hollow places. There's funny, quirky moments, but I haven't been getting as much of it read. I'm gonna probably get 15 minutes of it tonight, and then I'm just gonna zonk out because there's a lot going on at work. If you are a senior in high school in Japan, it's the end of your high school career, so you're doing a lot of testing, you're doing your final exams, interviewing at universities, and I have a lot of third-year classes, and then April hits and it's wild and crazy again because it's the beginning of a new school year and all of the teachers switch. It is terrible. I have a vlog where I talk about spring in Japan because it really is an entity, so I'll link that up above and down below if you're interested in my life in Japan. I don't think about how intensive this is because this is my normal backdrop as I go to sleep. I realize this is an overwhelming backdrop. Yeah, if you want to check out my life in Japan, I'll link it. I'm going on a hike. The weather is absolutely gorgeous. We've actually had an incredibly mild winter here in Japan. So if you are thinking of coming to Japan, at least in central Japan, it's been really, really mild. It's gorgeous enough that we're gonna go on a hike. I'm not gonna take a Sorceress Comes to Call with me, but I want to. I'm at the midway point and there's so many good things about this book. And it is just so funny. This humor that Kingfisher usually has, this one is very subtle in how well the humor is done. I'm just enjoying myself because it has so many inside jokes and I don't know, it's just done so well. I am worried about everyone. I don't know what's going to happen. Her themes and what she's trying to get across is just really well done. I'm just going to say, like, this book is exactly what I was hoping it would be, and actually it has surpassed an expectation that I didn't even know I had for it. And I feel like this is one of her stronger plots as far as like keeping on like track and kind of knowing where it's going but not knowing how it's going to happen. Feel like this is maybe one of her stronger plots alongside one of her stronger character dynamics, which is just, it's fascinating that she can make me say that after I've read so many of her books that I really just loved. Sorry, I'm repeating myself just because I really want to just bring this book and read it in the forest, but that's not what this hike is. Might be a little snowy. Keeping the backpack light. If there's any beautiful scenery, which I know there will be, I'll try and capture a little bit of it. We did check to make sure it was safe to go on this hike before going on it. We're not doing like a tourist moment where we go on a dumb hike that we aren't supposed to go on. The trail is open, there's people, but it's also just a little snowy. I'm gonna be careful. And I will see you in the next update. I cannot believe Kingfisher just did that. I can't talk about this because it'll just be immediately spoilery. One of the most interesting characters, something just happened, and like I was not prepared for it. I forget. She makes me forget. She is writing everything with this like cozy nuance to it. She's a horror novelist. I'm so upset. It's like it was not a half measure. Like that was halfway through the book and not a half measure. Damn. I have to go do things. I am so mad about the need to do things, but I have to go do things, and they're boring things. I have to go grocery shopping. I have to check in with a couple of my coworkers about a work thing. I need to email my artist, my cover artist. I have like some background stresses right now. I am clinging on to this book for life. Yeah, I have some stressors. I don't think that this is the vlog for it because I want it to be cozy and stuff like that, but I will have like a writing update and a couple other, I don't know how this is all going to function. I have to edit a video that I'm really excited about. If I edit properly, then I will have a video out where where I find my absolute favorite book, yeah, that video will be out. I'm confidently saying I'm going to edit that behemoth of a video and it will be out before this one. I'll link that up above and down below, and you can go watch that after this one because I definitely edited it. I need this to not be an unreliable narrator moment because I need really this vlog to come out in February so that I have content for February and so that I don't have to do anything in February. No, I'm taking care of myself. That vlog is out. That video is out, right? Right. Okay. But I have to go do things. And I'm really upset that I can't just sit here and read this. Another day, another temple, another shrine. This is winter, January specific to Japan. Lots of temples and lots of shrines. I'm gonna go and meet my friend today. We're gonna go to a temple that's nearby, and then we're just gonna hang out and go to a cafe. But that does leave me with an actually really long commute. I'm gonna get through a good chunk of the hollow places because I've only been reading it when it's time to go to sleep. So I'm getting it like 15 to 20 minutes at a time, which has been horrifying. And I think it might be nice to actually listen to this book in the light of day because there's been a couple commute moments, but nothing more than like 15 to 20 minutes. I'm hoping I can finish it soon because I want to get started on a Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. There's been so much tea Kingfisher in my system that I haven't been able to pick it up again, but I'm going to as soon as I am done with hollow places. But first, temples, shrines, friendship. I know I look like a Jedi, but that's because this light is bothering me, but I've been laying here listening to the hollow places, and I was listening to it on the way home from work. And once I got home, I didn't want to stop, but I still had to dinner and some writing. I have a routine that I'm trying to set for myself. Played by the rules, I did my writing, I did my regular routine, and then I went straight back to it. But I couldn't listen to it with the lights off. Something creepy happened. I was laying in the dark and I was just like, nah, this is not it. I was trying to relax and I had to turn this light on, but I'm so comfortable under the kotatsu, but the light just keeps shining and I don't have a book, so like my eyes aren't distracted, so I have this hood up. Anyway, the hollow places. Things definitely took a turn. The coziness ended, but there's still a lot of like really fun moments or like, silly moments. Realistic reactions to horrifying things happening has been a highlight in this book. If you don't want any even setup spoilers, like if you like to go in like I go in with nothing, then don't listen to this part, but it is on the back of the book. Kara is taking care of the museum while her uncle is getting like a surgery, and while there she's making friends with the coffee guy and hanging out. Her life is kind of like falling apart, but she's doing so in a really cavalier way. And then she accidentally stumbles into a portal that's in the back of this museum. Her and the barista that is with her end up kind of exploring this portal and finding out what it is and trying to get back. And this place, one of the descriptions, I was just laying here in the dark and I was like, absolutely not. This is not a functional way to spend my evening. I turned the light on, I cozied up, and I've just been sitting here listening to it, and then I was like, oh my god, this is a vlog. So, I'm not stalling reading more. I'm just taking some time in the light to talk to more people about what I'm doing, and I'm fine, and I'm not a coward. I'm actually super brave. So, anyway, I'm gonna listen a little bit more, and then I am going to go ahead and go to bed, but, yeah, just wanted to update you. I'm well within the hollows now, the hollow places, and it's well written, and I'm fine. Hi, I wanted to make this update really quickly because I went to bed and I had to switch to a Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking because I was laying there while something scratched at the door to the main character. Not in my house, and sorry, in the hollow places. I was asleep. I was on the verge, you know, that feeling where you're dipping into sleep, but I was also listening to the audiobook, and the main character in the hollow places has something scratching at her door. No. I was fine, but it was the description of it. It was actually irritating me. I don't know if this is just because I'm like half asleep. It was irritating me that she had a rational explanation for what that was because we all knew it was not a rat. She was like, oh, it must be a rat. Bo, her cat, go get the rat. And I'm like, are you trying to kill your cat? What is this? What do you mean it's a rat? You know what it is, and I can't tell you what it is because I don't want to spoil anything. I just, like, it wasn't a rat, I'll tell you that. So I switched over to The Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, because literally murder was a calmer and more relaxing thing to do. You know, it's really cute, it's really sweet. Also is following like a 14-year-old girl. There's vomiting and stuff like that. I feel like it's not a middle grade, but it's reading middle grade, except for the things that are happening. If a middle grade character, if my sweet Morgan Crow from Nevermore, The Trials of Morgan Crow, was thrown into a T. Kingfisher novel, it feels like a middle grade character has been thrown into a horror novel. And I'm like, that's not kind. Oh god. the glowing light from my air conditioner. I need to go to bed. Oh. I'm gonna leave it in just because I know I must have had a look of horror on my face as I saw this in the viewfinder. I thought I was gonna get got. Bad, I'm gonna wake my husband up. Good morning. I'm at the end of this book and there are absolutely unhinged things happening right now. Like I can't talk about it, but there's something we've been building up to this moment, and I feel like there has been a character I have not been able to get over an atrocity they did beyond the main villain. Evangeline is easy to hate. She just did something awful and I absolutely hated her for it. But there's a character that's been getting under my skin since the first betrayal. This is coming to a head. I can't talk about this. I have to turn my camera off and just finish this and then I'll give you my thoughts. I saw someone say that like they were expecting something more out of the ending. I haven't reached the ending, but the right before the ending's pretty freaking wild. Okay, I finished it. I finished A Sorceress Comes to Call by Kingfisher. I think this might be my favorite, but I'm also riding a high right now. This was so good. Enjoyed this and was irritated by this thoroughly. I was also laughing while also being horrified. These books, I really do love Kingfisher. This is definitely a 5-star, and this one is definitely more fantasy, less horror. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the Hollow Places today in the light of day, and I just think that that's such a good idea. The chai is done, and so are the Hollow Places. Okay, I finished it. I didn't move from this spot. I think I'm going to land on a 3.5, and I mean this as a really strong 3.5. I think I'll remember this book moving forward. I don't think it's going to be a 3 in the way that I will forget this book or its premise, but I think the premise is what's going to stick with me the most. I actually really enjoyed having a book where there was no romance. It was a straight woman, straight out of a divorce, and a gay barista, and them going into the Hollow Places and discovering this very paranormal, very creepy world, and then trying to deal with the aftermath of having been there. It was really interesting, and that is going to be what sticks with me. The reason why it's brought down a little bit is there were some moments in the story. The main character, it was just so obvious what was going on, or she would be asking questions that we didn't need to know the answers to, and she definitely should know the answers to them. Like, she was intelligent enough of a character and snarky enough, imaginative enough to not need some of the things explained to her that were explained to her. She had to rediscover things that we had already discovered, and she constantly had the assumption of like something normal happening in a paranormal situation. It's fine at first because I feel like I also might try and rationalize, or actually, I don't know. I don't know that I personally would, but I can understand the need to rationalize something irrational. I don't think that she needed to continue to do that throughout the entire book, and she definitely did try. Like, up until the very end, she was like, there must be an explanation for this, but she wasn't like science-y. There was no reason for her to do that, and she accepted other things perfectly easily. I don't know, it created a repetitive feeling in me where I'm like, why aren't you getting this? Why don't you know what's happening? So that would take me out of it pretty frequently, like enough for it to be a 3.5 and a T. Kingfisher. I also really liked the visual effects that were happening in my brain while I was reading this story. There are things not really described on page, but enough of a abstract idea for me to create my own visual picture of what was happening, which was really cool, and I actually think made it more eerie. I can apparently cook up some really nightmarish things in my head. T. Kingfisher allowed me to do that. The final battle at the end, that was entertaining as hell, and there were so many fun banter moments that I also found really funny, which is something I would say if you don't like humor in your horror, maybe this one isn't for you. Because there was a lot of humor and sometimes it cut the horror, I would say that this is a mild horror book, more on the side of unsettling and eerie than straight up scary. If I hadn't have been in the pitch dark, laying down, getting into my dream space and listening to this, I feel like I would have been fine. I'm half convinced I should cut the clip of me being afraid of my air conditioner because that's such a me thing. I probably won't cut it though because I'll feel inauthentic. If it's in there, it's in there. I was afraid of my air conditioner. Cry at poetry, I'm afraid of air conditioners. That's me. That is the end of the Hollow Places. Feels really satisfying to have finished another book. I'm gonna go ahead and skip forward in time and then I'll catch up with you on A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. Ugh. Okay, hello. It took me way too long to sit down and do this update. My vlogs are now converging. You're on the stack of books I'm trying to read for the Try the Chapter challenge. I finished A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. It was so stinking cute. Let me just start off there. I think at one point in this vlog, I said that it wasn't a middle grade because I thought truly that it was YA, but the more I read it, the more I was like, this kind of does feel like a middle grade, and I looked it up, and of course it is a middle grade. It follows a 14-year-old girl, and she's having middle grade problems. It's just there are so many big topics that are happening in this, but I feel like it edges you into YA. Like, I feel like it is a really great transitional book between those stages where you might be reading a little bit of YA, but you're still reading middle grade. As far as actual adolescent targets go, I understand as a 32-year-old, I think I'm 32, I'm 90% sure I'm 32, I'm reading a middle grade, so zero judgment there. One of my all-time favorite books is Nevermore, and that's a middle grade. I just think that as far as the focus and demographic that it's trying to reach goes, I feel like that's a good area to kind of gauge where this book is at, because it does have really big, important, somewhat dark topics and themes, but it deals with it in a very palatable way, something accessible to younger readers, and it follows a younger protagonist who isn't the epic hero, but a kid in a situation that sucks, and is with other kids in situations that suck. It did such a good job of talking about social stratification, prejudice, and dark themes, but it also had an empowering and very uplifting stance on these things. It also is just very cute. There was a lot of colorful and vivid world building and magic. Everything felt very much vibrant, so it's definitely not on the darker side of T. Kingfisher's fantasy books, but I would definitely still put it within the fantasy niche versus the horror niche. Yes, there's a murder at the beginning of the story, but that's not actually the larger topic at hand. What's actually being talked about is the fact that the body that was found at the beginning of the book is another small magic user, and that small magic users are actually being targeted in this community, and that our main character is also on that list. And I just had so much fun with it. But how does that fit in with the rest of T. Kingfisher's books? It's hard for me to place a score on this book because I feel like while I'd possibly give it a 4 or 4.5 on Goodreads, I can't say that it could have done something better. I felt like it did everything it needed to do, and that's more of my personal enjoyment. That's coming from a person in their 30s versus a child. What really does my score matter? I'm also going to be looking at it as far as what kind of T. Kingfisher book it is, because T. Kingfisher really does have a range, and I think it's really very hard to put her in a category. I don't think T. Kingfisher ever wants to be put in a box. I am going to attempt to put her in a box today. Just to be clear, I don't think T. Kingfisher belongs in a box. I even have a hard time like placing a pronoun on her because like I just feel like she's such a dynamic person that I adore her. I have read 10 books of hers now, and we're gonna go ahead and look at them. I have a tier ranking list up, but this is not going to be your typical tier ranking. This is more of a recommendation based off of what kind of T. Kingfisher book you might be looking for and my personal enjoyment within those subcategories. Let's go ahead and move over to my screen recording, and I'll kind of show you what's up, what I'm kind of thinking here. Okay, first and foremost, there are a lot of T. Kingfisher books. There are 4 pages worth of T. Kingfisher books. I have quite a few saved as wanting to read, lots read. Just to be clear, I have not read all of T. Kingfisher's books. So instead, what I'm doing today is I have 5 different tier ranking areas that I'm going to put these books into. First, we have cozy fantasy. These are books that are going to be very low on the horror scale. There might be some violence or darkness in her books. She has a very dark sense of humor that can eke into some of her shock values or moments. But these are books that are much less so horror and more so fantasy. I believe that all of her books are cozy. The horror fantasy are also cozy, to just make it as succinct as possible. Cozy fantasy, horror fantasy, this is where it's going to be more horror specific with fantasy elements. Cozy horror, this is less fantasy elements. There might still be some fantasy, but it's less so. Can't wait. These are my most anticipated, or the next books I plan to read of T. Kingfisher, and then her backlist, which are books that I am interested in but are not on my immediate must-read list. So let's go ahead and just pull from the books I just read so we can go ahead and put them in different categories. First and foremost, we have A Sorceress Comes to Call. I'm going to put this in horror fantasy. It did have more grotesque elements than I was expecting to see, and it definitely leaned into it a little bit more, but it was also very much so a Regency fantasy. The Sorceress Comes to Call, I wouldn't put it in the Regency category, but it had Regency elements to it with a sorceress and then horror elements. Yeah, there were some pretty disturbing parts in that book, and I feel like it fits in there. While I wouldn't say that it was like true horror, it was still mild horror. However, I think that A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking could easily go into the cozy fantasy category. It suits it. While it did have those darker moments in it, overall, the vibrancy, the pop, all of the fantasy elements were the larger scale things, and I did still believe that it was incredibly cozy and uplifting. Very heavy topics, so these are not going to be like Legends and Latte style fantasy books. These are going to have a little bit more edge to them, but are still incredibly cozy. However, The Hollow Places, which was the other book I read, I would put into cozy horror. It definitely was cozy horror too. Like, this is exactly what I'm saying when I say cozy horror. It had more supernatural elements, but almost a Lovecraftian edge to it, where like some of the things you had to visualize yourself, and it almost made it more horrific in you having to come up with your own vision of that, but there were still things described in such an abstract way. It was good, it was funny. Our two main characters were very platonic and sweet dynamic together. A lot of cozy elements to it, including the setting, which had taxidermy. Taxidermy should not be cozy, but you know what? T. Kingfisher can do it. There's the 3 books I read for this, but I've read other books. Nettle and Bone is super duper horror fantasy. This is the first book I read of T. Kingfisher. I'd never read anything quite like it. It's a novella, whereas A Sorceress Comes to Call is a full-length novel. This was such a concise and compact story. When I think about it, I don't think of it as a novella. I think of it as a full-length novel. I just thought she did so much with so little, and I was incredibly impressed. It definitely was something that turned me on to novellas, but I think that Nettle and Bone had more horror elements in it than A Sorceress Comes to Call. Let's see. Oh, What Moves the Dead? While we're doing horror fantasy, What Moves the Dead and What Feasts at Night? Okay, What Moves the Dead is more gothic fantasy, and What Feasts at Night is a bit more of a side quest with horror element. They both are fantasy books, but this one felt more like gothic fantasy. This one felt a little bit more like a traditional fantasy book, but with enough horror elements in it that I would definitely not put it anywhere else. The two together make a really nice pair, and I feel like I did have different expectations going into What Feast at Night. I was expecting it to be a little bit more with the gothic undertones, but this is very much so a character piece and a story that follows Alex, the same character from the first book. In this book, they're traveling back to their home and they end up trying to solve a murder. This was a horror that had a subverted expectation as far as the ending went. I really was impressed by how it ended, just because I didn't know how it would end in a cozy sort of way. She pulled it off, and this is a really great set. I think as a duology, I don't know that I feel as strongly about it, but because I believe that there is going to be a 3rd book, if it's just a serial of Alex going on different side missions, I absolutely adore them, and I would love to, and I feel like this series will get stronger. They're a sworn soldier with PTSD, tinnitus, and they are non-binary, and they are just the sweetest little beans, and I loved finding out more about them in the 2nd book. It was really nice. I just think as a duology, the only thread is really Alex, so if you liked the gothic themes in What Moves the Dead, you might not get it in What Feasts at Night, but if you're in it for Alex and the horror fantasy elements, those are definitely present in both. Okay, what else we got here? Sword Heart. Sword Heart is the cozy fantasy for me. I absolutely love Sword Heart. This was such a joyfully meandering quest. A woman is trying to get her inheritance and ends up with a sword that has a sworn soldier inside of it, and he is going to escort her to the nearest village so that she can hire a monk in order to help her. So this is the world of the White Rat, and within the world of the White Rat, Sword Heart is a standalone, but there were references to, I believe, this duology and this ongoing series. So this is a larger world, and I could tell it was very well lived in, and it made it incredibly nice to just kind of nestle in and be in this world. It felt grounded, it felt lived in. It was my first introduction into the world of the White Rat, and I ended up actually picking up Paladin's Grace because of it. I really enjoyed Paladin's Grace. Our main male love interest is like a knitter, and he knits socks for people. Loved that they were just an older couple and that there was a really really cute romance happening, but also definitely had some horror elements in it. I think that the cozy fantasy aspects went out. I think if you like A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, I could recommend either of these to you. The same way I could recommend either of these to you with any of the other ones. These make sense together. These are a little bit darker. I feel like I'm on track here. I could be totally wrong. Next up is Thornhedge. Thornhedge is my least favorite of the cozy fantasy, but I still feel that it fits in there. It was kind of like an interesting Sleeping Beauty retelling with definitely a pretty fun twist. This was fun to read. It was just fast and less memorable, but I still really liked a lot of the elements that were in it, and I would definitely recommend it if you are hungry for more T. Kingfisher books. I would almost pair it with Nettle and Bone. I really just don't think there was really enough to call it a horror book the same way that Nettle and Bone had enough of those dark elements to feel very haunting. Speaking of haunting, A House with Good Bones is a haunted house book. I loved the main character in this one specifically. I believe her name was Sam, and she studies bugs for a living. She's absolutely fascinated by bugs, and she has just like such a fun sense of humor. I feel like the two main characters in these books would actually be friends. They were like not the same font, they were friendly fonts. I feel like these two books together are a nice pairing. They're definitely on, I would say, the softer side of horror, but there's still some terrifying moments in them that make them more horror than anything else, and the fantasy elements are more paranormal. Okay, so those are all of the books I have read so far of T. Kingfisher. Books that I cannot wait for, we can go ahead and put Hemlock and Silver. This is the book that's coming out fairly soon. I just did a book release video where I go through all of the books that are coming out this year that I'm excited for, so I'll link that up above and down below. I can also stick it on screen here, so that's when the book is coming out. I just don't remember, but I'm very excited for it. I am highly anticipating it. Another one, after reading The Hollow Places, I feel like The Twisted Ones is said to be her scariest, and so I want to read that one to see how it compares to The Hollow Places, because I did feel that The Hollow Places, despite having some freaky, eerie, surreal moments, I would like to see how much T. Kingfisher can actually scare me, and I am told that this is her scariest one. If you know a scarier T. Kingfisher book, let me know. And then, because I really enjoyed Paladin's Grace, Paladin's Strength, I believe, is the next one in that series. I want more of this world, but I'm afraid that I just adored these characters so much that I started with the standalone and I should have gone in reverse. So if you're thinking of picking up these books, I would maybe start with Paladin's Grace and this series and then go to Sword Heart. The world was very familiar, and there were definitely crossover characters that I noticed were being talked about in this book. There's definitely crossovers, Easter eggs, all of that fun stuff, and I feel like the quartet is probably the place to start, and Sword Heart is just a fun story within it. It has my whole heart, so I'm going to go ahead and just stick the other two in this series in the backlist. They're ones that I'm hoping I get to, but it will really depend on like how much I connect with Paladin's Strength. And I guess the premise of this quartet is really that these different paladins get their different powers or magics from these gods that they follow, and it's them going on quests, doing things. I've only read the first one, but I'm excited to see where it goes. Another book I'm really excited for is Minor Mage. This is another novella, and I believe it's also another middle grade, and after reading Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, which was a full-length novel, I'd love to see a middle grade novella and how that goes. I actually have it as an ebook, so I see myself reading it fairly soon, but I feel like that is actually in the order of excitement, so I'll go ahead and just leave it there. The Illuminations, I believe, is also a middle grade, and then these two works are some of her older ones. They are also within the White Rat world. I'm a little nervous to read them just because they are so much older, and I've seen her just in these books grow so much as an author. These are about even, actually. Sword Heart and A Sorceress Comes to Call is about even, but I'm really curious, and I'm a little nervous to see if these hold up, and it's a duology, so for now these are here. If you've read the Clockwork duology, I don't know what the actual duology is called, let me know if you enjoyed it, what you thought of it, or any of these books. If you would put these in different categories, feel free to let me know. This looks correct to me and my experience with T. Kingfisher thus far, but you might have a totally different experience or be able to give me recommendations based off of where I've placed these. I'm excited to read any of these, and if you have recommendations, go ahead, leave them down below, or if you have different orders for the books, categories, something I missed, I'm here to hear it. But I think this vlog is actually over. I did it, and the month is practically over as well, so I guess this is a month-long vlog of what I read. I only read T. Kingfisher books, and that felt really nice. You can go ahead and check out my other videos. I'll go ahead and leave them here in case you're just now finding my content. I've had quite a few new subscribers. If you don't know, I also have written a book myself. It's the Solstice Court. I'll go ahead and put the graphic there because I cannot possibly reach back on that shelf. I am way too comfortable. All the links for that will be down below. If you made it to the end of this video, video, go ahead and leave a matcha emoji because that's both cozy and currently what I'm drinking. Whether you do or not, I hope you're enjoying the sun or more stars wherever you are. And until next time, bye!